This story kicks off with an explanation about a type of bar that isn't as innocent as it looks. Drop bars. They seem like regular hangouts where people grab drinks and chat, but there's a twist. These places are secret hubs for mobsters to shuffle around dirty money. Cash keeps coming in and out, thanks to bagmen who handle the transfers like clockwork. The thing is, even the bar owners don't know when their spot is being used as a drop bar. It's all hush-hush. At one of these bars, we meet Bob Sajanowski, the main guy of the story. Bob works as a bartender. He's a quiet, reserved dude who doesn't draw much attention. But don't be fooled. There's a darker, rougher side to him hiding under his calm surface. His cousin Marv is technically the guy running the bar, but it's not really his. The place belongs to the Chechen Mafia, who have a tight grip on the whole operation. The bar has its regulars, mostly older folks who sit around drinking and reminiscing. One night, they're raising their glasses to a guy named Richie Whelan, who passed away under mysterious circumstances about 10 years ago. As Bob serves them drinks, Marv snaps at him, saying they're running a business, not a charity. He's mad because Bob lets an elderly woman drink and smoke for free when he's not around. Bob tries to defend himself, saying he's just being nice, but Marv isn't having it. Bob eventually caves and promises to cut it out. Another thing about Bob, he's super religious. He's always showing up at church, though he keeps to himself most of the time. One night as he's walking home, he hears a weird noise. A dog whining from inside a trash can. Curious, he checks it out and finds a beat-up little pibble puppy that someone left to die. As he's figuring out what to do, the woman who lives there, Nadia, shows up to see why some random guy is snooping near her place. Bob explains the situation and begs her to help him with the injured pup. Nadia's not sure if she can trust him, so she asks to see his ID and even snaps a photo of it. She sends the pic to her friends, just in case Bob turns out to be some creep. They eventually take the poor puppy inside, patching it up as best as they can. The puppy's covered in cuts and bruises, but nothing too serious. While they're talking, Bob notices Nadia has bruises on her neck too, which is a little suspicious. Turns out, she works as a waitress and knows her way around taking care of animals. They agree that Bob will come back for the dog in 2 days. Meanwhile, at the bar, two brothers are having a sketchy conversation. The older one is hyped about a plan to rob the bar, saying they need to prove themselves to their boss. The younger one, who's strung out on drugs, is freaking out because he knows this bar is connected to some seriously dangerous people, the Chechen Mafia. Even though he's terrified, he gets pressured into going along with the plan. Not long after, the bar gets hit by masked robbers right before closing time. They wave their guns around, forcing Marv to hand over all the cash. Marv warns them they're making a huge mistake messing with these people, but he doesn't have much of a choice with a gun in his face. During the chaos, Bob notices one of the thieves has a broken watch. After the robbery, they find out that Randy, a staff member, was beaten to death and left in the backyard. Detective Torres, who's been going to the same church as Bob for years, shows up to investigate. Torres asks Bob some questions, but since the robbers were masked, Bob doesn't have much to share, except for one thing, that broken watch he noticed during the heist. The detective also finds out about $5,000 being stolen. While chatting, Torres asks why Bob skips the communion line at church, which makes Bob uncomfortable. He dodges the question, but deep down, it's because he doesn't want to confess his dark past. Marv's furious when he finds out Bob mentioned the watch to the cops, worried the Chechens will blame them. At the same time, Bob picks up the puppy from Nadia, who agrees to help him shop for supplies since he has no clue how to take care of a dog. They hit the pet store, grabbing bowls, a leash, and even a poop bag. Bob throws out a name for the dog, Mike, but Nadia thinks it's a terrible name. She suggests Rocco instead, and they make a name tag for him. Later, Bob notices a statue of Saint Rocco at church with a dog next to it, which feels like a funny coincidence. Things take a darker turn when a thug named Eric Deeds starts lurking around. He's bad news and has his eyes on Bob and Nadia. Meanwhile, the Chechen boss, Chavka, shows up to confront Marv and Bob. He's got one of the robbers tied up and brutally beaten in his van. Chavka demands to know if Marv or Bob recognizes the guy, but they both deny it. He also asks why the cops knew about the broken watch, putting even more pressure on them. As things unravel, Torres discovers some dirt on Marv, that he lost the bar to the Chechen mob years ago. The detective wonders if it's worth trying to take down the mob, but realizes they're too powerful to touch. Back at Bob's place, he's struggling to train the puppy now named Rocco, who's peeing everywhere. While out at the dog park, he runs into Nadia again. She offers to help with Rocco for extra cash since she's lost her night shifts at work. Bob, who's clearly into Nadia, quickly agrees. After they exchange numbers, Eric shows up again, making Bob uneasy. Marv, on the other hand, is dealing with family drama. He lives with his sister, Dottie, and their dad is in a nursing home on life support. Dottie wants to pull the plug and use the money they're spending on their dad to enjoy life, but Marv refuses, saying they owe it to their father to stick it out. Turns out, Marv isn't so innocent. He's actually been working with the robbers the whole time. He scolds one of them, Fitz, for being sloppy during the heist and letting the cops get involved. Marv even tells him about an upcoming drop night, giving Fitz another shot to get it right. Meanwhile, Bob's at home when Eric shows up again, barging in uninvited. Eric claims the puppy is his, but Bob isn't buying it. Things are about to get messy as Bob tries to figure out how to protect himself, Rocco, and maybe even Nadia from the trouble that's closing in. Eric starts throwing his weight around, acting like he's the big boss. He says if Bob really owns Rocco, he should have the dog's ID and a chip number. Then he goes into this whole explanation about how these chips are implanted in dogs to track their owners. Pulling out some random serial number, Eric claims it proves Rocco belongs to him. Bob isn't having any of it and fires back, saying Eric doesn't deserve to have a dog since he treats it like trash. But Eric, being his usual slimy self, threatens to get the police involved. Bob, trying to keep the peace, asks him straight up what he really wants. Instead of giving a proper answer, Eric just mumbles something about the weather being unpredictable, steals Bob's umbrella, and leaves. What a piece of work. Despite all this drama, Bob and Nadia grow closer, thanks to Rocco. One day at a cafe, they get into a deep conversation, and Nadia says Bob's the first guy who hasn't poked around about the bruises on her neck. Bob tells her he doesn't need to know. It's her business, not his. Feeling comfortable, Nadia opens up about her past. Turns out she hit rock bottom during a drug binge and actually tried to take her own life with a potato peeler. She survived and used that second chance to turn things around. Bob listens without judgment, and their bond gets even stronger. Back at the bar, Marv is a nervous wreck. He's still shaken up about that sketchy dude who asked for directions earlier and is paranoid something bad is coming his way. He can't let go of the bitterness from losing the bar to Chavka Yumarov years ago. Marv's self-esteem is in the gutter and it shows. Meanwhile, Bob stumbles upon a horrific sight. A trash bag containing a severed hand and blood-stained cash. The stolen money is back, along with a broken watch and this gruesome hand. No one knows who returned it or why, but it's clear someone's sending a message. Bob, as calm as ever, brings the hand into the bar and casually wraps it up like it's no big deal. Marv watches in disbelief, wondering how Bob could be so composed, almost like he's done this kind of thing before. Their moment is interrupted when Eric randomly shows up because they forgot to lock the door. Marv tries to kick him out, but Eric, being nosy, lingers long enough to make things awkward before leaving. Marv starts grilling Bob about his connection to Eric, and Bob explains how Eric claims to own Rocco. Marv's face goes pale as he tells Bob about Eric's sketchy reputation. Apparently, Eric is the same guy who supposedly killed Richie Whalen, the guy they toasted to earlier in the movie. Marv warns Bob to stay away from him, but Bob seems more intrigued than scared. After all this, Bob quietly disposes of the severed hand by tossing it into a river. like it's just another Tuesday. Detective Torres isn't far behind, poking around and asking Bob if he knows anything about Eric. Bob plays dumb and denies it. Later, the Chechens swing by the bar to collect the stolen cash. Chavka also drops the news that the bar will be the designated drop spot for Super Bowl night, which raises the stakes even more. As all this chaos unfolds, Eric starts pestering Bob about Nadia, making cryptic comments about her past. Bob doesn't waste any time and asks Nadia directly about her history with Eric. Nadia, visibly shaken, admits that they used to be a thing, but broke up after realizing how toxic he was. She warns Bob that Eric is dangerous, and even confesses that he's the one who killed Richie. Bob, however, already knows. Marv, in the meantime, has his own plans brewing. He meets up with Fitz, one of the robbers from the earlier heist, and suggests a new robbery during the Super Bowl when the bar will be loaded with cash. Fitz, terrified for his life, refuses and just wants to stay alive. Marv, losing patience, kicks Fitz out of the car and, in a cold-blooded move, runs him over repeatedly, killing him. Marv's desperation is on full display as he cleans up the mess and switches cars to cover his tracks. While Marv is unraveling, Bob and Nadia patch things up. Nadia apologizes for running off earlier and admits that she's scared of Eric. She also tells Bob more about her troubled relationship with him. Bob reassures her, and their connection deepens. Meanwhile, Detective Torres digs deeper into Eric's background and stumbles upon something in his psychiatric records that piques his interest. Things take a darker turn when Bob finds evidence that Eric has been inside his house. Rocco is fine, but Eric left behind Bob's umbrella as a not-so-subtle message. When Bob confronts Eric, the thug demands $10,000 if Bob wants to keep Rocco. Bob stands his ground and refuses, saying he doesn't have that kind of money. Marv, on the other hand, drops a bombshell by saying he won't be at the bar during the Super Bowl. Bob is immediately suspicious, thinking Marv's cooking up something reckless. The tension between them boils over, with Marv venting about how he's been humiliated ever since losing the bar. He even accuses Bob of disrespecting him by letting an elderly lady use his old stool. Bob brushes it off, saying it's just a stool and doesn't mean anything. As the big night approaches, Bob prepares for whatever's coming. He hides $10,000, a gun, and Rocco in the basement. Eric, in true Eric fashion, escalates things by forcing Nadia to go to the bar with him. Nadia, visibly uncomfortable, complies to avoid making things worse. When they show up, Bob is furious but keeps his cool. Eric flaunts his gun and makes it clear he's planning something. Nadia, in tears, warns Bob that Eric intends to shoot him. Bob stays calm under pressure and offers Eric money for Rocco, but Eric, ever the manipulative creep, shifts the conversation to Nadia, asking how much she's worth to Bob. That's when Bob decides enough is enough. He reveals a shocking truth. He's the one who killed Richie Whalen, not Eric. Bob explains that Richie owed Marv money, and when Richie finally paid him back after a big casino win, Marv's debts were still too high. To cover it all up, Bob killed Richie to keep Marv's secret safe. Before Eric can react, Bob pulls out a gun and shoots him twice in the face, ending the nightmare for good. He tells Nadia she's safe now and can leave if she wants. The Chechens quietly handle Eric's body, and Chavka rewards Bob by giving him full ownership of the bar, renaming it Bob's Bar. As for Marv, his story comes to a tragic end when he's killed outside the bar. Detective Torres, still suspicious, investigates further, but doesn't get enough to pin anything on Bob. In the end, Bob brings Rocco to Nadia's house and apologizes for everything. He admits he had to kill Eric to stop him from ruining their lives. Nadia, though scared, can't deny she has feelings for Bob, and they agree to start over. And that's how this gritty, suspenseful story wraps up. If you like this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you didn't, hit the dislike button twice, just to make sure. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more recaps like this one.